The college football playoff format has been tweaked. Nebraska fans, of course, you hope that it matters that it's been tweaked for your concern. All right. Huskers Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all stopping by for a 160th edition. Justin Adams is here, of course. Cheesy Corn Sports, the Big Ten Show, and check out those two channels with Justin as well as his work right here at the Voice of College Football, GBR.
Yes, sir.
Justin, how you doing tonight?
Not too bad, man. Just a busy week, and a lot to talk about in terms of college football playoff and these network TV deals. It seems like a never-ending drama series between these different contracts and stuff like that. So,
and the latest in the drama, folks, if you didn't follow it today, is nothing earth-shattering, considering we already knew there was a proposal that had been implemented, had been approved, and was set to go, but with the demise of the Pac-12, of course, had to be adjusted.
Yep.
And this is the way in which it has been adjusted. So going forward here in 2024, this 12-team college football playoff will look like this. 5 conference champions selected automatically based on their ranking. So the 5 highest ranked conference champions will make the field. And then the other 7 are at-large selections by the College Football Playoff Committee based on the rankings. So you're going to have the 7 highest ranked at-large teams that did not win a conference. And of course, if you look at the model where we once had a 6+6 model with 5 conferences, basically it's the management committee of the playoff committee protecting that group of 5 champion. So I know that there's a possibility that it could shake out Justin a little bit different than this, but I think we're almost assured that if you go back through history, that it would play out this way. The 4 conference champions from the 4 major conferences will make it, and then the best of the
rest
group of 5 conference champions, the highest ranked, will make it. Now, I'll let you know what strikes me as funny about that, and then I'll let you take the floor, is that the group of 5 has been weakened considerably in the last couple of years. The best programs in the group of 5 are no longer in the group of 5. Houston, BYU, which I know wasn't technically a group of 5, but they're now in the Power 5, meaning they're no longer in the rest of college football. So you've got BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, and now SMU leaving the group of 5. And you're looking at the very best of the best in the group of 5 over the past 10 years. Before that, it was certainly Boise State was making that bid, and typically that. But in the last 10 years, that's largely been your field out of the group of 5. So it's ironic to me, or if I was being less kind, I would say moronic, that during the time in which the group of 5 was better, that they were excluded from the playoffs, except for that one time in 2021 with Cincinnati. And now we've officially given them a place, but they've lost their top 4 or 5 programs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's basically they've done the exact opposite of what they should have done. They should have addressed this before. Now they have the opportunity. Like you said, it's been depleted to the point where it's really going to put a team in there that maybe doesn't even, if you thought group of 5 teams maybe didn't belong before, even more so now, just because, the standard is lower. But, when it's coming up to kind of this, in your opinion, does this, in the grand scheme of things, do you think this is to help? I mean, does this help the top conferences more? Does this bode better for the ACC, or does it bode better for the SEC Big Ten type of schools?
Well, I think it's a good balance of the playoff committee selecting what they think and what most of us will think are the best teams in the country.
Correct.
But balancing that out with, if you've won a conference championship, then you are earning a place, and you're not only earning a spot, you're earning one of the best spots, a bye in the first round. So let's look at last season as an example. If we had all of these teams that are moving conferences now in the conferences that they would be in, and I posted a video actually looking at the Big Ten, just consider this. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Washington, Oregon would have made the playoffs.
Yep.
Now, I understand the obvious rebuttal to that is, well, Mark, they would have different schedules, so we don't know what would have happened. And
Yep.
while that is true, think about how easily all of them would have made the playoffs. Outside of Penn State, they were 10-2, but the other teams were undefeated or they had one loss.
Yep.
So even with a more difficult schedule, with tack on a loss here or a loss there, they would all still have made the playoff.
Yep. Yep.
So the Big Ten would have had 5 teams in the playoff last
That's
year.
correct. Yeah.
And I took it through the 10 playoff seasons, and you're generally looking at 3 at the worst. Typically 4 is a safe number, and then 5 being a possibility for the Big Ten
Yep.
and the SEC. So I don't think it's good news for the ACC or the Big 12, but I think it's justified based on what we expect to be the strength of these conferences. And then they also have their conference champion in a position where they're going to have preferential treatment, a bye. So they're honoring conference championships, which I think is, even though those aren't necessarily going to be the best teams, I'm on board with that. Otherwise, why have conferences?
Yeah, exactly. And like I saw something kind of breaking it down, and so what it says here is, it says in most years the 5-7 format will assure the conference champions from the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and ACC a spot in the playoff, along with the highest ranked group of 5 conference champion. The CFP intentionally won't refer to the group of 5 in its description of the format, though, because there is a chance that a champion from one of the Power 4 conferences finishes ranked below the top champion from the American Athletic Conference, Conference USA, Mountain West, Sun Belt, or Mid-American Conference. So in that instance, are they saying that it doesn't necessarily, so it's not necessarily a group of 5? Let's see, because there's a chance champion for one of the powerful conference ranks below the top champion. Yeah. So in essence, that's what they're trying to do, because there was some confusion here that whichever conference champions are ranked the highest could get in. Said it could be from the PAC, could be from the MAC, but it's 100% group of 5, correct?
Yes.
From my understanding, just making sure that I'm reading that correctly, because when you look out here, there's multiple differing opinions and multiple understandings of what this actually means. So I just wanted to read that off and make sure that everybody kind of gets clarification as to what that is. But I agree. I think this format, works. I don't think we're ever going to get something that everybody's approve of. I don't think we're ever going to get it to where we have what everybody agrees are the 12 best teams in there. But I think more so than the format changing, and we'll get into a little bit of that athletic article here in a little bit where it may change more. Do you think this is, because there's 10 months, of course, until it comes back around. Do you think that this is a structure that will kind of, I guess, be better than what we had with the 14 playoff? Do you think the 5-7 is kind of the way moving forward, or do you think there should be another amendment to this? Like, what do you think is the best case scenario to get the best teams in there?
So these will not be the 12 best teams in the country. I don't think there's any question about that. It should be the 11 best teams in the country if the playoff committee is doing its job. And of course, we could sit here all day and look at the rankings from year to year and squabble between 11 and 12 or 10 and 11 and 11 and 12. So when I say they're going to have the 11 best teams, I'm saying within 13 or 14 teams, because you're going to have a couple 9-3 teams and it's going to be an awfully close decision. But then you're going to have that next team is going to be like the 50th best team in the country. So think last year, Liberty would have been in the playoff. Liberty got that group of 5 bid to the New Year's 6, even though I think it should have gone to SMU, because my argument was SMU was 11-2. They won the toughest conference in the group of 5, the American, and their 2 losses were against Power 5 teams. Liberty didn't play any Power 5 teams. So SMU also had an undefeated record against group of 5 teams and better group of 5 teams.
Because
regardless, Liberty got the nod,
year,
and they got annihilated by Oregon.
Was that the Malik Cunningham year, right? At Liberty? Was it him at Liberty?
You're thinking of, no, this is just last year.
Oh, yeah.
Last season.
Yep. Yeah, because I remember, yes, SMU was ranked, right? Was Liberty ranked as well? So it was between those two teams?
This past season.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I was trying to remember which Liberty team we were talking about. I guess I completely forgot that they were there at the end of the year. I mean, I remember SMU being good. But to your point about this being the best teams, and I see, never mind me in the comments here about talking about require another expansion. Now, here's where the issue comes in, I feel like, because if the deal with ESPN, from my understanding, if that deal with ESPN is solid, set in stone, and what's going to be going forward, then they're stuck in this 12-team playoff up until what, 2031. So there
Yes.
will be no more expansion. There will be no more changes, right? So this is kind of the way it is moving forward based on that. If that's correct, right? No changes, or
Yes
can
and
they
no.
amend? Okay.
Yes and no. And the reason I answer that is because rarely do we see a contract broken or changed in any way. However,
Yep.
let's understand that we're still operating under the old contract
Yeah.
that ESPN had through 2025,
Yep.
and they changed the playoff in the midst of that contract. They had to redistribute money and figure some things out,
Yep.
but they still stayed with that.
Correct.
So I'm not going to say that just because there's a TV contract running through 31 that they won't change it.
Okay. Because when I was reading into it, there was mentioned something about it not being able to expand, but I don't know if that meant it couldn't be amended. And that, I think that's the biggest thing here, is because if we look at this as a set standard for, we're going to start with this, and then we're going to kind of mold it as we go along, then I think it's a great place to start. Now, if they're saying this is the way it's going to be going forward and this is it, then I don't know. I'm still kind of indifferent about it. I don't know how you feel versus the 8 versus 12 team, but this is what we got. But yeah, I was really curious your opinion on it, because looking out there, you have, depending on what conference you're in, of course, you have a million different perspectives on this, and what's good and what's not. And essentially, what I'm seeing, for the most part, is it seems like people are thinking this is geared towards favoring the top 2 conference, and this is going to continue the separation. Now, I just wasn't sure your perspective on that. So,
That all depends on how the playoff committee selects these teams.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If they select the teams the way that they did for 10 years, think about this, folks. This Florida State situation in 2023, in which they bypassed Florida State to take 2 one-loss teams,
Yep.
that is the only time in 10 years of a playoff, that they jumped a Power 5 team with a worse record over another one.
Yep.
They have basically selected them right in order.
Yep.
Every other playoff has been right in order. And of course, there have been multiple, let's say 11-1 teams, and they had to make a decision, or 12-1 teams and make a decision between, but they've never jumped records. They have stayed right in order of Power 5 records, except for this was the first time.
And that's another thing too. No matter what, the subjectivity will change. You know, those little things will always sneak in. Like we'll think, okay, we got a system here, and then all of a sudden, like you said, one year something happens that's different, and all of a sudden they flip flop it on its head. And that's why I don't think anybody's ever going to be happy with the playoff. It just, no matter what. But I do think it's better. But I don't think anybody's ever going to be happy about it. But yeah, it's one of the situations where it's like, I'm trying to find the best way to word this. And if you wanted to continue, go ahead. I'll figure out a way to.
Oh, I
phrase
can talk
this.
about this kind of stuff all night. This is how I think the committee's going to approach it. They definitely have built up an SEC bias, but I
100%.
understand it.
It's a business.
That because it's been a combination of 2 things that are justified. One is that the SEC has played better in non-conference games, not every season, but most seasons, than the other conferences. And then number 2, of course, the SEC has had the best postseason success
Mhm.
to
Yep.
build up that equity, even though I don't believe that that should factor into it, what's happened in previous seasons. There's no question that that is factored into the minds of the
Yeah.
committee.
That's very matchup based, and like there's so many nuances to that. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it should be considered because it's a new season. And
That's
so
true.
the merits of these teams should only be evaluated based on what they've done this year.
Yep.
I believe that the committee is going to tell us that they have a blank slate and that they are approaching this just by evaluating the games and the conferences based on the games on the field.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a 10-2 team from the Big 12 and a 10-2 team from the SEC. You better know that the 10-2 team from the SEC is going to get selected. I think that they're going to stay in order of record, but give the tiebreakers to the Big 10 and the SEC.
Yep.
And now I think in future years, let's say the SEC and the Big 10 dominate this playoff for 3 years, and they also dominate non-conference play. I think then you may see 9-3 teams from the Big 10 and the SEC jump 10-2 teams.
Okay. Yep.
Or even non-conference winners at 11-1 from other, if they build up that kind of equity with the committee.
Could turn into almost the same issue. And you know, I don't know if I've talked to you about this before, but my whole thing the entire time was, you know, where there's money, there's corruption. And I felt like having ESPN as the sole partner of the college football playoff naturally makes it to where they can then springboard their SEC brand, you know, all over the place, hype them up, do whatever, because it's in their best interest and their bottom line. And then also they are the ones that are having the playoff. So where there's money, there's corruption. And I feel like naturally, at what point does this become a conflict of interest? Or do they care if that's a conflict of interest, that the ESPN is so intertwined in the college football playoff committee and the whole nine?
And that's why I was surprised that ESPN was able to
Me too.
grab the rights for the entire thing, because I thought, to your point, there's a conflict of interest. Therefore, why wouldn't ESPN, being so tightly connected to the SEC and the Big Ten, so tightly connected to Fox, I was expecting this sharing of the playoff going forward.
That maybe they'd rotate the national championship game and then kind of share the playoff games. Yeah. That's what I thought too. So that's the other hiccup here. But I guess that can kind of lead us into kind of Matt Rule's comments today about, you know, because you mentioned the non-conference for the SEC. And you know, I wasn't sure the number. I wasn't sure if the SEC does, you know, based on strength of schedule, have the harder non-conference schedule typically. But just going into Matt Rule's comments today, because this has caused a stir. So here's what the little clip said, or the little snippet. He said, first downs, second guesses. First things first, 6 wins, a bowl game. But with the move to a 12-team college football playoff in 24, it's never too early for schools, including Nebraska, formulate a plan to make a run at the playoff of the future. My conversation with Husker coach Matt Rule, he indicated he would be against playing non-conference games against Power 5 teams. With USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington joining the Big Ten in 2024, it doesn't make sense, Rule says. In a year where you hope to play 15 or 16 games, why would you elect to play a really tough game early? A couple of years ago, if I had told you we were going to play Oregon and Washington as non-conference games, you'd say, holy smokes. Well, now that's the conference. Okay. So I guess your instant reactions to that, I'm just straight out the gates.
So everyone has a different interest in this based on their role and what they're trying to accomplish. So I completely get Matt Rule is first and foremost about winning football games. Yeah. And he figures we play in the Big Ten, we play a tough enough schedule. If I win enough games in this conference, nobody's going to remember that we played, you know, the Little Sisters of the Poor 3 times in non-conference because we went out and played Ohio State, Michigan, Washington, whomever else. So our schedule is going to look at Michigan the last 2 years. They've been the number 1 seed in the college football playoff and won a national championship.
Yeah, look at last year's. Their
last 2 non-conference schedules have been deplorable.
Yeah,
Nothing.
bad.
Well, it wasn't needed. I don't like it. So I don't like what he's saying, and I don't agree with it. But from his perspective, absolutely, I get it. That's why, in my opinion, Justin, these schools should not be scheduling their games.
I can see that now for sure. Yeah.
If college football was ran correctly, and maybe we're coming to this point with the SEC and the Big Ten getting together, if there was a commissioner or governing body, and I've certainly outlined this many times through various videos, I would have a scheduling committee, and the scheduling, just like a conference schedule, would be completely out of the hands of the schools. They would be handed their schedule every year.
Well, that's funny too, because we could get those moments like in the NFL where they kind of release fake schedules to the team and stuff like that. Those are always fun. But it also raises the question too: should both conferences have to play an equal amount of conference games? Should they be set? I think the SEC's at 8 right now, and the Big Ten's at 9. Should they both be at 9? But then also, in previous years, right? Because people are looking at this, they're like, okay, well, look at, people questioning Georgia schedule, or their non-conference schedule as whether they should have gotten in, or bringing up specific examples. I think this is the perfect time to where that transition should happen to where your non-conference games making them easier. I agree. I don't like getting up on Saturdays to watch us go play ITT Technical Institute. I'm not a fan of that. Like, I'd rather get up and watch. Like, I get up excited, nervous for the big games. But I also like winning. So there's that. But with that being said, this 12-team playoff almost makes it to where, that whole strength of schedule stuff is really probably not going to matter for certain schools, right? Like, you got to think of Nebraska probably comes off of a 2-loss, 1-loss season. They're probably in no matter what, right? So that would then only impact those schools at the bottom. So like with this being said, it makes total sense right now to make that shift. So should that be something that the NCAA tries to, or do you think it will ever be where they're on both a 9-game conference schedule, or do you think the SEC is going to continue? Because 2024, of course, they're going to continue with the 8. But with that being said, do you think that's an advantage that the SEC has that the Big Ten doesn't? That would give the Big Ten a reasonable reason why they should do something like this. Or to your point, the SEC has a harder non-conference. However, they play one less conference game.
Yeah, the SEC's at an advantage, and the Big Ten's at a disadvantage, and this is why, because of playing even if the SEC. Let's just assume both conferences are equal in their difficulty.
Yeah.
And I could go through the years and show you where the SEC has won the most difficult non-conference games, but that's at the very top.
Yep.
They're playing 4 non-conference games. The Big Ten's playing 3. The SEC, these teams generally play 1 difficult game, and then they play 3 cream puffs. Big Ten teams typically play 1 difficult game and 2 cream puffs, generally speaking. There are some exceptions. So, yeah. And then what that's going to do is look at it this way. And we'll forget Oklahoma and Texas for right now. That by playing that 1 extra give me game, that's 14 teams playing a game in which they're going to go 14-0. If you look at these games, they're ridiculously clownish.
Yeah.
So they're going to go 14-0. Well, if they were playing a additional conference game, it doesn't take a mathematician to figure out they're going to go 7-7 because they're all playing each other. So they are artificially adding 7 wins to all of their team's schedules. And forget about the playoff for a second. Just look at bowl games. They get more teams in the bowl games because they're basically adding 7 wins, and a couple of those drop on what would have been a 5-7 team that now becomes a 6-6 team.
Yeah.
And so they push a few more teams into, and so convert that to the playoff where a 10-2 Big Ten SEC team is going to get in, and a 9-3 probably won't.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense. And it's another reason why I feel like, there's a sleight of hand almost by the SEC, because it's one of those things where they can point to their non-con, but yeah, like you said, like they pad those extra wins in there.
They
And
point
so
to the difficult non-conference games, not
yeah,
all the cream puffs that they play.
exactly. And so hopefully that's something that the Big Ten and the SEC can kind of clear up. And I don't know where that's going to lead to. That's a whole different topic. Um, but I think in the situation Nebraska's in, and where if Nebraska starts winning, they're going to get publicity. They're probably going to get ranked quicker just based on their name. I know a lot of schools like that, like Texas, right? Texas was notorious for getting ranked when they probably shouldn't have yet been ranked, preseason polls and stuff like that, right? So I feel like Nebraska is one of those teams that, like, when they start winning, they're going to be, up in the rankings and boosted up the rankings. So I think Matt Rule's right on point here, only with this situation, because I think it works here. I don't think it would have worked, at a Baylor, if he was at Baylor. I don't think it's that. I think it's situational. And I think it works here, and I think it's only right that the Big Ten tries to look for some kind of competitive advantage to build in their own way, because the SEC has been getting away with it for this amount of time. So there's a mixed bag of opinions. Some people are completely for it. Some people are against it. Like iron sharpens iron. Like, I understand that. However, this is almost like playing um, it's like keeping up with the Joneses. And it's like you're trying to, like, yes, keep that competitive nature, and you still want those tough games in there, but at the same time, like, you don't want to cannibalize yourself, because you're sitting there sticking to the standard of iron sharpens iron, while the SEC is rattling off playoff win after playoff win. That's my take on it. I get what people are saying with that, and I get what you're saying with that, but yeah, it makes sense. Like you said, it makes sense for him to take that angle and want to go that route. Now, I've never understood the school scheduling. It's like when I get a notification or something saying, like, yeah, in 10 years, Nebraska is going to play Oregon for a home and home. And I'm like, yay, dude, I don't even know if I'd be alive then. So I can't, what I'm saying? It's like, it was just ridiculous. So I'm fully on board with the whole schedule thing.
Yeah, what's funny about that is people will make arguments, or have in the past, that well, they need to schedule that far out in front to
Oh,
plan and all this other business. The NFL, Major League Baseball, the
the bowl game.
NBA, pick your sport. Those are much more. A Major League Baseball schedule, you talk about a
I mean,
complicated schedule, 162 games. They schedule it in the off season. They're not scheduling it 5 years ago. You can schedule an entire season.
yep.
And I actually think that it would be good promotion for college football. It would be good marketing for college football if, like the NFL, you're an NFL guy, you can relate to this. You know that there's an NFL schedule release.
Mhm.
And I think it's the most hyped and overrated thing imaginable.
Yeah. That's what I was pointing out earlier, where, like, for instance, like the Seahawks, Pete Carroll did a fake schedule release where he had them playing
Mhm.
like the most difficult teams. But yeah, to your point, it is a little
Yeah.
it was a little overhyped. Each team puts their own little graphics out.
If you follow the NFL and you understand the scheduling formula, we can sit here right now and put together every team's schedule within a couple games.
By the conferences, yeah.
Yes, we know
Mhm.
who they play in the division, then it rotates that they play another
Mhm.
a division from the other and the whole deal. You understand that. So to make this national holiday out of an NFL schedule release, it's brilliant marketing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they talk all day, and the NFL Network and everybody goes crazy, ESPN talking about it all day. I would do the same thing in college football.
Yeah. Yeah, and the NCAA in a way kind of almost shoots themselves in the foot, I think, by trying to be they're not taking control of the things they should have, or they should. And that's going to be I think that's going to be their demise, is they're not taking control of the things they should have. They're very reactive. They're very slow and late in their adjustments. So yeah, this, and we could probably spend all day on this topic, but yeah, it was interesting just pairing that based on, Matt Rule's comments, because and that's another point too. It's like, a bowl game is important, yes, but Ted said in here, will bowl games have less or more importance after the new alignment? I think bowl games kind of importance is already lessening, just because, and naturally players aren't playing. It's the nature of the beast. You don't have the teams out there, the competitive teams. You don't have the starters out there. It hurts the product, and so using even a bowl game as a measuring stick now gets tougher and tougher. like making a bowl game as a rung on the ladder of success, as the first step. So I do like what the article's saying about positioning themselves kind of in a place where they can play for the playoff in the future. But the bowl game still is the 800-pound of gorilla before we even get there. However, I just think the bowl game's pizzazz and all that, and it being used as a measuring stick, I don't necessarily know how long that's gonna be even a usable metric. But
Totally agree. Totally agree. For as much as I don't like it, that's the truth and that's the reality and that's where we're headed.
Yep.
I don't even like the bowl games being used as fronts for playoff games, meaning to me, the Rose Bowl is ending right now. In a sense, the Rose Bowl had already ended because to me, the Rose Bowl is the Big Ten champion against the Pac 12 champion. That's the Rose Bowl.
Yep.
And it's going to be whatever teams win the first round playoff games or the second round playoff games to advance into the Rose Bowl is going to be in the Rose Bowl. It's just a name on a playoff game. It's just a playoff game is what it is. So I don't even buy into these bowl games. I think they're dead now.
Yeah, I agree.
The ones in the playoffs.
Yep. I
agree.
Me.
And it states that it doesn't say it that way. Of course, it's going to say it in a pretty delivery that basically the agreements between the conferences and the bowls are no longer because you can't control who's going to go to what bowl games. So the Sugar Bowl and the SEC no longer exists.
Yeah, and the bowl games are another example of quick planning. They throw those together. How quickly? In a few weeks. Just putting a couple teams in there, get all the logistics settled. Boom, let's have the mayonnaise bowl.
Yeah.
They'll figure it out. But yeah, that's a whole and then that Athletic article, we have to check that out before we talk on that. But just for people's understanding, I saw an Athletic article about a couple hours ago about college football playoff meetings resuming with ESPN TV deal on the table, but not necessarily saying that it is set in stone. And that there's still potential that other bidders can come in. No official offers have been made. Mark, according to what it says, no official offers have been made from other networks, but word on the street is networks have been told that they can offer up a bid as well. I don't foresee anybody. I don't foresee it being bigger. I don't see ESPN being outdone. It seems as if ESPN is almost putting a timetable on the college football playoff to make sure that they get all of the details of the playoff ironed out. And there's urgency from ESPN side, but there doesn't seem to be urgency from the side of the college football playoff.
I would love to know what changed in the last couple of days, or if the media, whomever, jumped the gun in reporting that ESPN had the playoff locked down.
Yeah, because it says ESPN has agreed to terms of representatives for college football playoff on a 6-year, $7.8 billion extension to televise through 2031-32. But the commissioners and presidents that run the CFP have not yet agreed on any aspects of the format beyond the 12-team model in place for the next 2 seasons, setting up a pivotal few days of meetings. So it seems like they said that they're treating the playoff for the 26-27 season as a blank slate with no special allegiance, any format decision over this. So the 5-7 is the start. But this was posted 2 hours ago, so this was after that. It says, meanwhile, ESPN executives are growing impatient, and as Puck business writer John Oran first mentioned, that's what I meant, ESPN, not SEC, will consider pulling the offer if the college football playoff fails to get its act together soon. So apparently there's going to be meetings over the course of the week and stuff like that. So that's just what I'm reading. So everything seems to be up in the air right now. I have no idea what's real and what isn't. But yeah, that was surprising to me too. That's why I clicked on it. I'm like, what do you like? I don't know. So it could be part of the reason why they kicked their butt into gear to get that at least one part of it ironed down, the 6-6 versus the 5-7 format. But just putting that out there for people if they want to look up on that and stuff too, since we haven't really had a chance to read over it enough to talk in detail about it, but I can tell you're itching too. So, but
I'll talk about it.
No, yeah, and I'm like, I'm just trying to think like specifically where I saw. So Sports Business Journal here says CFP says it has not agreed to the TV deal with ESPN. Let me pull it up on the screen here. I'll just present this so that way you can see it as well. And present screen. Let me turn my ad blocker off. Okay. All right. So has not agreed to a new television contract. According to at least one member, committee memo sent his league administrators. CFP agreeing to conclude an extension of the media rights deal with ESPN is incorrect. In fact, administrators, commissioners, corresponding presidents, CFP board of managers have not reviewed a draft potential new deal. Continues to work toward an extension. No deal can be formally agreed upon or signed without litany of unresolved matters to long-term structure of the playoff. So that it kind of echoes the same sentiment as the Athletic article there. But then the college football playoff people were like, yeah, well, we have 10 months until this even happens. So it just seems more of ESPN trying to make everybody just bend to them. But I wasn't sure your take on
Well,
that.
to me, it sounds like there was a miscommunication, just like you hear all the time when there's a disconnect between somebody in the room knowing that the deal's about to be done. It's done in nature. It's I'm trying to think that the terms have yet to be completely ironed out,
It's
but
like the 1 yard line.
they've got a framework of the deal, and so then people run around and run out and can't wait to report that the deal's done, we got it, and then maybe in reviewing the details that there's a disconnect and they get hung up on something, and so it appears to me, and there was a comment made by the MAC commissioner in there that it was miscommunicated, that it was incorrect to report that there was a deal.
Yep.
Yeah, they probably were extremely close, had the framework for a deal, but something came up.
Yeah, I was surprised that hasn't gotten more traction and more publicity, because I did that when I was just looking up, to go search about the new format just to read up on it, and I saw that there. So, that was interesting too. But
and by the way, Matt Rule, this is for him. The out of conference games, the big non-conference games, starting in 2025, Nebraska is playing Cincinnati in Indianapolis. I don't know what the purpose of that is, but they're playing Cincinnati in Indianapolis.
I don't either.
Then after that, 2026 is Tennessee, and 27 home and home with Tennessee. 2028 and 31 is Arizona home and home. And then 2029 and 30 is Oklahoma home and home.
So, yeah, I mean, pretty difficult. I mean, well, depending on how those teams look in 10 years, we're also trying to predict that. But, yeah, man, that's the thing too. A lot of these are scheduled so far out, like it's not going to matter for the foreseeable future anyways. But I guess we can get over into some recruiting stuff now.
Absolutely. So we have 2025 quarterback TJ Lateef.
Yeah.
And an offer made by Matt Rule and staff.
Yeah. Latest, quarterback visitor. And then been kind of trying to see what type of quarterbacks they're going to offer and stuff like that. And so they got April 27th, which is the spring game date. They're going to be bringing in TJ Lateef out of California, top 10 QB, according to 24/7. Trying to lock down visits to Ole Miss and A&M as well. Looking at his film, very, very athletic. He's a fast guy, track guy. Spent a lot of his high school career injured, but still, played very well. And he's got a pretty good arm. His arm talent isn't like Dylan Raiola type of deal, but what he does a lot is he throws over a lot over the middle of the field, which he's not a very tall quarterback. So seeing him throw over the middle of the field a lot at 6'1", a lot of the tendencies for quarterbacks, at especially 6 foot under around that range is to throw towards the sidelines because there's better visibility. But most of his film is him throwing, routes all over the middle of the field. And he can make, really good throws on a rope, and he just doesn't have like a 60-yard bomb type of arm. But he's really good on the on-schedule throws, the intermediate part of the field, quick slants, ins, outs, stuff like that. And he's athletic, can create with his feet. And one thing that really stood out to me on his film is how calm his feet are in the pocket. He just very much, he's a lot of stability under him, has his base under him, doesn't have happy feet. And, like Glenn Thomas and Matt Rule had said, when you got a calm feet, you got calm mind. So I know that's something they liked about him. Again, top 10 QB, does a little bit of everything. Maybe one of those guys they want to come in here and use kind of all over the place. I see him as a type that they can bring in and use kind of all over the field as a quarterback hybrid type of deal. So yeah, excited to get him on campus, because right now getting people on campus has been very successful for Matt Rule and his staff. But 6'1", 185. Yeah. And when they asked about him, he said, I like Nebraska a lot. The coaches are showing me a lot of love, and they came up to my school. That's when they offered. I hear from both offense coordinators, Coach Glenn Thomas, Coach Marcus Satterfield, and I'm really comfortable with them. And then, so he threw for 1,965 yards, 13 touchdowns, and rushed for 230 yards and 5 more scores. And a season he wasn't 100%. So very, very excited to see kind of the targets of these future, quarterback classes. But I'm curious to know if they're gonna start throwing some offers to, because again, they talked about the big body guys with the huge arms that can throw in the wind, which leads me to wonder, is he going to be specifically QB, or is he going to kind of be all over, so that leads me to my big question with Latif. But overall, his film looks good. And like I said, there's been the reason I kind of did some digging into these percentages that I'm about to go through is because there's been a lot of conversations when talking about recruiting to people I hear about who don't pay attention to necessarily, who's coming to visit or blah, 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 and all this other stuff. But, so I was curious, I'm like, what percentage of the visitors that have come in with this staff versus previous staffs, have committed? So I went through 2024, and 2024, Matt Rule landed 25 of the 38 visitors, 65%. Prior to June, though, there was 42%. And then after June, 84%. Okay, so between June on to December, landed 84% of the people that he had on campus visiting. Okay, so going back to 2023, 11 of the first 12 visitors, when Matt Rule took over, signed. 11 of the 12, they all visited the same weekend. 12 people, 11 of them committed. 27 of 30 committed after he was hired. That's 90%. Going back to 2022, 34 visitors, 15 committed, 44%. So, and then comparing that to like Ohio State, for instance, Ohio State, 20 of their 48. Of course, way different comparison. They're shooting in a much higher tier of recruit, but 41%. And then Oregon out of 16 out of 28, 57%. So Matt Rule's success rate here has been pretty high as far as, and he's very efficient with the type of person he gets to campus, which is why I think it's much more imperative with him than in previous years to kind of pay attention to these guys that he's getting on campus, and we can kind of break them down a little bit more and understand that if he's bringing them on campus, it probably means that he's going to either have a place for them in the class, or at the very least, they are going to be very much in the conversation up until their recruiting ends for Nebraska. So, yeah, it alludes to what kind of, even on his ESPN, or it wasn't an ESPN interview, it might have been an ESPN YouTube channel, I can't remember, but they interviewed Matt Rule, and he was talking about, his big kind of keys were development. I'm trying to remember what they were. Player player development, retention, and oh man, I'm trying to remember. But when looking at kind of the numbers, Nebraska being the third highest team in terms of returning production, 77%. I think right now is the time where Nebraska fans can start shifting their mindset over into looking at these a little closer and seeing that, like I said, these guys are going to be the guys that they're going to go after the most and try to get in here for the long haul, but also that there's a purpose and an action to everything. And then with the retention, these guys are probably not, because another thing that comes is like, oh, they're going to sign, they're not going to stay, they're going to verbally commit, they're not going to sign their letter of intent and all this other stuff, or they're not going to stay with the university. Well, looking at the one season that we have, 77%, third highest retention rate in college football. I think a lot of this stuff, Nebraska fans that are kind of downplaying, we're starting to see come to fruition a little bit. And we're starting to see it show up in the numbers that this is different. And this is one of the most frustrating things that I think as a Nebraska fan trying to talk about Nebraska, and how they're going to improve moving forward and stuff like that, is a lot of this stuff people don't necessarily see or pay attention to, And so when determining how Nebraska is going to do next year and beyond, or where they fit into the, echelon of the Big Ten, like for instance, we talked about it, or we were going to talk about last week with the power rankings, for the Big Ten, where they had the win totals. Nebraska was at 7.5, like a 5-way tie with USC and stuff like that. Just in your opinion, where do you think they fit on that echelon of, let's say, the Big Ten into next season, right? In your opinion, because I did a power rankings for the Big Ten and I had Nebraska at 6, and I had them at 8, had them at 7, bumped them to 6. So I had them right above USC and Wisconsin at 6, at 7.5 wins. Wisconsin's pegged for 6.5 over under. USC's pegged for 7.5 over under. So, and I've had Ohio State 1, Oregon 2, Penn State 3, Michigan 4, and then 5 Iowa, 6 Nebraska, 7 USC, 8 Wisconsin, and then on from there. So, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to click that comment. I'm curious your take. Like, where do you think, as an outsider looking in, where do you see Nebraska fitting in that Big Ten?
So let's start from the beginning, which would be, where would Nebraska have ranked last year? So if you bring in the 4 newcomers from the West,
yep,
these are the schools that would have been ahead of Nebraska: Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Maryland, Iowa, Wisconsin. So basically you would have had 6 teams, unless I'm missing somebody, 16, Rutgers.
Oh yeah.
So 7 teams in the Big Ten from last year.
Yep.
Ranked ahead of Nebraska. And then if you want to split the difference, Nebraska, Illinois, Minnesota all had the same record. Nebraska beat Illinois. They lost to Minnesota. So actually they would have been 9th behind Minnesota. Oh, I forgot Northwestern, 10. Nebraska is 10 out of 14
we beat
last year. Bring in those 4, and all 4 are ahead of Nebraska last year.
Correct.
So now they are 14th out of 18 last year.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not this year, everyone. So don't get upset.
You've already told us how you feel about using last year as a measuring stick.
I'm just starting the discussion from where we are last year.
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable to expect Nebraska to eclipse Minnesota, Northwestern, Rutgers, UCLA, and maybe a couple other teams, but those 4, I'm fairly confident that they will. I would put them more in the 9 range.
Okay. Because Sonny popped in here. Sonny, I thought he had him criminally underrated, but I know I am a little biased, and I had them 6th. I originally had them 8, and I will admit my bias may have had me bump them up to 6. I was comfortable at 7. Now, with all of, year 3 of Matt Rule, and all of this stuff and Glenn Thomas and all the things that went awry last year. And do you think that at the end of the season next year, that's where they're going to land overall? You had them 9, just in terms of where you think they're going to land after next season.
Well, let's all understand, I don't make predictions in February.
All right. Well,
but since you're pressing me for it, see, Sonny had him at 10, so Sonny and I are on the
Sonny
same
also had
wavelength here.
Illinois at 12.
12 out of 18?
Yes, I had him at 16.
So I would have Illinois right now in front of Indiana,
Purdue,
and that's not a slam dunk by any stretch.
I think that's it. No, I think that's about it.
I think Purdue just hammered Illinois last year.
Purdue's got a top 30 recruiting class too.
Indiana, and you just mentioned Purdue.
It's hard.
They could be better than Michigan State. They could be better than Northwestern. They could be better than. I could see UCLA having a real drop off, but man, they would have to have a pretty major drop off. They were a pretty good team last year.
Yeah.
I think Illinois is more in the 15 range.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay, I was really curious because for me, right, like I'm trying to see how much this is biased, and I'd be curious to know the commenters like where they think we're going to finish in the rankings there. But the On 3, when they had them listed, they had us at 7. And then, so yeah, had a little fun, made our own power rankings. I was really curious to where you think we fit in there. I was hoping for a little bit better of an answer, but maybe I just got to convince you a little bit more on the coming shows. But yeah, I think, Matt Rule talked about, last year, what was acceptable and what the coaches would take responsibility for is no longer going to be a thing next year. Next year, there's going to be a standard set. And I do think that if, we talk about the jump in year 1 to 2 of Matt Rule, and I do understand that it's very specific to situations, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to do that now. But and I do think it's reasonable. I think 8 to 10 range. I think probably the ceiling maybe is 4, but I don't know. I was curious your take on that, because just trying to convince the field seems to be impossible, or that people aren't quite understanding the differences and the nuances. Because even when commenters come in, it's talking about like, well, 3 years ago we did this, and how do you expect us to do it next year? Well, it's like these are two completely different situations.
Yes.
So people holding over us the one loss thing, or holding over the Scott Frost era over the head of the team, and not pointing out and looking at the actual improvements being made. That was my thing. I was curious your take on that, and I was always curious to see if we can have some people in the comments give their take on where they think we're going to finish, because that opened up a can of worms for me. Now I'm curious.
Well, it doesn't appear as though anyone's too upset with me in the chat, but I could imagine there might be some people upset with me that watch the video later.
Yeah.
I'll just remind people that for all the years that I've done this, I don't know when we started a Nebraska channel. I could guess, I don't know when it was, 2019 maybe. Every year I have made a prediction on Nebraska, just like everyone else.
Yep.
On every other team. And typically people aren't appreciative of that, that prediction, Nebraska fans, but it has always been a better record prediction than what they've delivered.
All right. Well,
I catch all this hate when I say Nebraska is going to go 5-7, and people are like just going crazy, just crucifying me in the middle of July when I say I'm picking Nebraska to go 5-7. This is just a typical year, Justin.
This is the point right here. So many injuries on offense.
This could be last year. This could be the year before. This could be the year before, where I'm sitting here in July or August saying Nebraska is going to go 5-7.
Yeah.
I catch all these people that are just killing me. Oh, Mark, you don't know what you're talking about. You're killing us. You hate us. And then what happens? They go 3-9 or 4-8. And I actually overrated them. That's what has happened almost every year.
Here.
It has happened every year. Yes.
Okay, so you were right, 5-7, right? However, right, when you made that prediction, you didn't know that they were going to lose 8 of their 11 offensive starters by week 4 to injury, and that have the worst quarterback room in college football. Does that change anything in terms of seeing that season as a success and maybe more successful than the 5-7 you had originally predicted?
Okay. To be fair, I was just throwing out 5-7 as
Oh,
kind of
okay.
a general.
Gotcha.
That's kind of a
I won't listen
random
to that.
year of me predicting. I believe I could go back and check just to make sure. I believe I picked Nebraska to go 6-6 last year.
Yeah, I think I had 7-4 or 7-5.
So I'm almost certain I picked 6-6. And yes, they took on a ton of injuries.
Mhm.
And they also just had ridiculously bad quarterback play.
Yeah. Yep.
Probably the worst in the Big Ten. I don't even think it's that debatable, the worst quarterback
Oh,
play in the
I
Big
think
Ten.
it was one of the worst in college football.
Yeah.
Yeah, the worst quarterback room in college football. So, but yeah, so that was my thing with all that taken into account and stuff like that, and you talk about, I know you talk about all the time, your, what is it? What do you call it? The big jump, from year over
Yes.
year.
Yeah, I need to come up with a phrase for that. I need to come up with a catchphrase. You're probably better at catchphrases than me. Come up with
All
the
right.
big jump, but it also could be for teams that are taking the big drop too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but
The 3-game.
the
Yes.
3-game win increase, it's rare that happens.
No, it's not rare.
I mean, sorry, I'm completely spoken. It is more likely than people expect to make
Absolutely.
the
It's
big leap.
way.
Yep. And then on the other side of it, it's significantly less than people expect, right? That take the fall.
No, sorry if I misrepresented that.
No,
It's
what's the
just
converse to it?
it's not expected by people that there are that many teams that have a drastic increase or decrease. Because I ask this question every year, and I'll ask the chat: how many teams do you think had an increase of at least 3 wins or 3 losses last year? Meaning they just had a drastic change in their season, one way or the other. And I always get 6, 7, 8, no, 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Husker fans, just listen to that and be happy, because I'm gonna stick to that one stat that says we should have won 8 games this year had we not had bad luck, where they randomized all the orders. I'm saying if any team's got the potential to take off next year, it's Nebraska. Deion, listen, Deion's my guy, but Deion is like, I don't want to talk about anything until we start winning here. I love it.
That's it. Now, what gives the most credibility to your optimism is, of course, that was just Matt Rule's first year. If we were still plodding along with Scott Frost, then I would really be driving that home that, okay, I'm not seeing it. But that was a first season, and first seasons are typically difficult.
Yep. We'll be, I think 8 wins is very, very realistic. I think on my schedule prediction the other day, I got it at 8-4.
I got to get 1 point across tonight, Justin. We got an Amazon link. It's in the description section. And here's the deal, folks, is that that Amazon link provides you with the same exact shopping experience that the one that you use right now. It's no different, except this is the one way you can contribute to the channel without spending a penny. We'll also let you all know in future weeks because we're about to wrap it up for tonight. But we do have a super chat contribution that's available for everyone. If you would like to contribute to the channel here at the Voice of College Football GBR. So Husker fans, step up, and we appreciate your contributions.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate y'all's support, and support of the channel. We greatly appreciate it, man.
John D'Adamo is getting fired up, getting ready, getting prepped, getting all those good things together here on our Michigan show right now, here in just the next few minutes over on the Michigan channel. So why don't we just take everyone, move on over to the Michigan channel, check out John's work.
John's great.
Talking Wolverines.
I highly recommend sliding over there if you have the time.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, Justin, here in future weeks, getting set for spring practice, we'll
Oh
start
yeah,
breaking down some positions.
I'm excited. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then ranking. I have some I already have the position groups ranked. So we'll probably have that coming up soon. And then each individual position will be broken down. So yeah,
Nice.
we'll get that rolling.
Love it. Next Tuesday, folks, Huskers Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Make it a habit. Bring a friend or 2 or 50, and we will do it all again, talking Nebraska football with all of you. In the meantime, Justin, what do you have going on elsewhere? And before we get to that, keep in mind, folks, that Justin posted 2 videos this week. We've got a quarterback depth chart breakdown.
And there's a third one. There's a third one coming tonight.
Nice.
Or another video come tonight.
And then Justin gave you a little preview to his breakdown of game by game through the Huskers schedule. So check that out. And again, another premiere coming out tonight.
Yep. And Stephen, appreciate Stephen with the super chat. Appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. Another thing too coming up, I was able to find get access to film from 2023, 2022, and 2019 Baylor. So I'll have some potential videos coming up on some comparisons and and stuff like that. So I have some fun stuff planned for y'all.
Nice. Interesting. And then also we've got Cheesy Corn Sports, and we've got the Big Ten channel.
Yep. Big Ten show.
I screw that up every time. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. We almost, Oregon was our last program overview. We did nearly 5K views on that one. We're up to almost 400 subscribers. So yeah, if you want to get over there and subscribe, I'm going to have a Nebraska program overview coming before too long as well. And yeah, just keep you up to date on every team in the Big Ten. And yeah, you can get a lot of intel and a lot of fun stuff coming. We got a lot of good stuff in the future.
Stephen, thank you so much for the 5 spot there. Appreciate that. How's it going, Mark? Been a while. Hey, Justin, doing great things for the channel.
Appreciate that, Stephen. Thank you.
All right, folks, make it on back next week for edition 161 with Justin and myself right here at the Voice of College Football, and we will see you next time.
Peace.